and joining us in this little session. The idea behind this was very, very simple. We look at Excel and look at how it has evolved over many versions in many years, and to put it into some kind of context, we're seeing, as we talk to organizations, Excel becoming almost like a sort of de facto area where Excel is sort of being used to look at data and store data. And the real sort of, I guess, sort of driver behind this is to go ahead and look at the whole idea of Excel itself in terms of how it's being used for the data and its sort of presentation. Now, just swapping on a slide, just bear with me. Okay, so first off, the start is really as how Excel has evolved in terms of looking at getting data into it from various sources, whether those be manual input or whether those be connections to other areas that a business might use, other sort of software systems. Once we've got the data in, how do we actually then look at it? And this is where Excel 2013 has really started to push some of the boundaries and make things a little bit easier in terms of the sort of the views that you might have and what you can actually physically do with that data itself. Now, first of all, import or connection. Excel 2010 really introduced this idea, and 2013 has moved it on. What is a connection? Traditionally, we've opened up Excel data, and it's sort of been a file and open. It's been that kind of approach. We pull the data in, and then gradually Excel's evolved to talk to other systems. It talks to tabular data. It talks to non-Microsoft systems. It eventually started to introduce the idea of querying the web. So when you're looking at actually getting your data in, just a little bit of us around sort of the overview of that. Is it a one-off? How are you looking to view your data? So Excel is starting to be engineered so that it is really designed to connect permanently to that data. But because data sizes are large, they're disparate, they're in different sort of formats, where should the data actually be stored? So the next question, I guess, is it a one-off? Maybe not. Is it a connection we want to look at? But beyond that point, where should the data reside? Excel 2010 started to introduce the idea of the add-in of Power Pivot, which allowed it to connect to other data systems, where you could break the limits, as it were, in terms of Excel, in terms of number of records. And from that, what Excel has now allowed us to do is leave data where it is and connect to that. What size is your data? What shape is your data? And by shape, what we're talking about here is your data a single flat file, two-dimensional Excel-style table, or are you connecting to various sources of data and you want to pull those together into one view, one pliable view within Microsoft Excel? 2010 started that with the idea of the Power Pivot and the idea that you could actually create relationships between other data sources and pivot them in. And now 2013 has built that in and allows you to connect to an awful lot of other things together with some add-ins that are there. And the last question, which is one that's really 2013 starting to address, is what, if you like, what kind of data are you bringing through? And once you've brought your data in, as it's a connection, how does that new data need to be morphed or merged or appended into the sort of, if you like, the existing data set that we've currently got? Now, if I just hop into Excel here, and look at the ribbon, the tab across the top. This is the 2013 version, of course. There are some new features that have appeared and some additional add-ins. Power Pivot, as previously mentioned, that's now built into Excel Pro and Pro Plus and the Enterprise editions, and that allows you to connect to and if you like, model your data. What Excel has also introduced is the idea of something called Power Query. Now, this is it's technically in a sort of beta stage, hence you can see the old sort of SAS, the send feedback, send a smile, that kind of stuff over here on the right-hand side. But Power Query allows you to connect to other data systems, data stores, wide variety. I'm not going to demonstrate this exactly now, but for instance, you could go in and do not just a traditional web data query, which might be querying sort of any website that contains tabular data, but now it also supports online searches where you can go and connect to perhaps some kind of open data source, a wiki source, that kind of thing. Stick the source of the search in, do the search. Once the search returns a set of values, you can then pull that data down and drop it into your workbook, and it becomes a data model that is then locally held. Where else can we get the data? We've got the traditional ideas of various files, that kind of stuff. Databases. It's, as before, supports an awful lot of connectivity. Increasingly, we're seeing a push towards places that might hold data, such as those built around the Azure model. And of course, what we've also got is the SharePoint and the tabular data that you might want to connect with within the Microsoft sort of environment. What's really important about the Power Query is not just the fact that it allows you to talk way outside of the Excel box, but it also allows you, and this referencing that last question, whether you want to merge or append data that you've pulled through, and actually add that and combine that from one table and add to those data. So if you're creating a connection to something else, a connection to another place, you not only have the ability to, if you like, completely refresh, but also to build a data source using this merge and append idea. So Excel's sort of starting to really sort of push out the boundaries as to where you can get your data. It's still, of course, got the traditional data tab. So all of these types of connections are available, but the Power Query really extends that. These other external data stores really are about you grabbing data, maybe connect to it on a refreshable basis, but grabbing that data and keeping it as a single sort of mass of information rather than being able to build. And that's where the Power Query comes in. The key there is the word query. So this is building on some of the Power Pivot technology and allows you to create data from different locations. So just simplifying it a little bit, back to the sort of a normal sort of data view. Simple little table. Standard information. Let's say we're managing an online business. We're shipping out orders for, as you can see, bulbs and seeds and plants and that kind of stuff over a period of months. We want to do a little bit of analysis of our numbers, of the metrics that we've got in here. Simple table. What have we been able to do with regards to, or using Excel? 2010 enhanced the idea of perhaps formatting something as a table. The old list that was previously in Excel. That's fine. That gives us some sort of subtotaling and some nice, easy tools to play with. We might want to look at that data visually with conditional formatting, where we can apply some bars and icons and what have you. Now, if any of you are sort of looking at Excel now from a point of view, you're maybe moving towards a later version of Excel, perhaps from Excel 2003, then these are tools which are in existence there, but they have been vastly enhanced. So we can have a combination of things like bars and icon sets and really put some visuals across that. And all of these allow us to go up to a ribbon, a tab, pick the Home tab, grab the data. We might want to go in and view it visually. So we might want to look at this on the basis that we're going to perhaps convert this stuff into a chart and look at it that way. 2010 built on the idea of bringing in Sparklines. These are little cell-based charts, single cells. But they're starting to now, with 2013, to help you along the way. So the technology now allows you to do a lot more quickly, but without having to, if you like, build things necessarily from scratch. You still have that option, of course. So what do I mean by that? Well, if I was to perhaps select some data, I'm going to go and grab this data, fine. Nothing new there, of course, but I get the Smart tag in the bottom right-hand corner. And the Smart tag lends itself to, I guess, most of the title of this session, which is Quick Data Analysis. And quick data analysis builds upon those tools, which are spread across different parts of the ribbon, across different parts of the toolbar, and allows you very quickly, with a couple of clicks, to apply these visualizations, or perhaps a tabular format, or maybe charting, or maybe pivots in terms of your view of the data. Live preview exists here, as was introduced with 2007 and 2010 enhanced on that. So I might want data bars. What does a data bar do? Very simple. As soon as you select some numbers, you select a range of numerical values, what Excel does is identify the lowest point and the highest point, and in effect draws a line from one to the other, and then places each value that you've selected on that line. Once that line is being measured, then it provides, or if you like, applies a sort of a value setting. So the further along that line you are towards the higher number, the bigger the data bar, the longer the bar. And therefore, you can get a visual as to, if you like, where that number is in relation to all the others. And the great thing about conditional formatting is that if you apply it and then alter the numbers, Excel re-evaluates the entire data set, if you like, and will adjust all the formatting it applies. So I might have some data bars. I like those. They're nice, they're visual, they're a quick, easy way of just seeing where the number is in comparison. You might prefer some kind of traffic light kind of report, I guess, the old sort of RAG report, although this is inverted the other way up, other way down. It's like a GAR report. So what Excel does is apply a lower shade of green for the not quite so high, and then down to the deeper red for the lowest values of all. And then you get some shading in between that. Again, nice, easy way of visualizing the data. We might want to look at some icons. So what do the icon sets do? The default one that's applied is a three icon set, in this case the ubiquitous arrows. Again, Microsoft Excel measures the values and divides the data set that you've selected up into thirds, not by how many are in each third, but by value. So the bottom third takes the red, the top third will take the green, and anything in between that then allows Excel to sort of sit those in a sort of a mid by percentage. Now these are all off the shelf, if you like. These are the default sets. We can of course take ourselves up to the Home tab. We can go and look at conditional formatting, write our own rules, go to 5 icons or something different if you wanted to. What else can we do? Greater than. So a quick pick on this. This is showing you all those values that sit above 50% of the whole value range compared with all the others. Top 10% picks out, in this case, the top value. It's only a small data set, so it's only picked the one. But we wanted to just keep it a bit smaller to make it easier to visualize. This is identifying, in effect, the max, the highest. Again, we could change the performance and the percentages we want. So some very easy visual ones to apply. A couple of clicks, as it were, select your data, pick up the data, get to the quick analysis tool, say what you want to look at, apply it, click, job done. Easy to visualize. You want to adapt it, go up to the Home tab, play with it. If you want to clear it, nice and simple, easy process, clear the format, get rid of it. So we've got some visual stuff there. What else can it do? Well, you might be looking at this from the point of view of some calculations. So if I were to take the totals view here, I might want a sum at the bottom automatically applied. So this is picking up on some of the sort of format as table type technology that's built into Excel, or perhaps working on almost like array-based information. You might be looking at the average across that. You might want to look at each, in this case, let's say each column, the total of each column, that represents its percentage of the total of all the columns. You don't need to do the formulas. You don't need to know how to work that value out. It gives you the tools. You might be building this on a month basis, so you're looking for a cumulative running total. Tabular, sit it along the bottom. Very easy. If along the bottom's not what you're looking for, you want it down the side, fine. Shuffle along on here, and you can have those repeated as you wish down the right-hand side. You might want to go down the route of a full-blown table, in which case we can pick a table out and we can format it as a table if you want. Tables also include pivot tables. I'll move on to those with another tab on this sample file. And then there's the charts. Now these are really quite clever because what they're doing here is looking at, if you like, building on the technology that allows you for that quick preview, the live preview. Show me something before I apply it kind of approach, but do it with a visual tool. So you might want to say, well, what's my data going to look like as a chart? Now, as you can see here, it's giving me some basics, fine. Not really got a lot of detail. Okay, we'll go back. Yes, that's fine. Not too bad. Chart's all right. Let's think, no, we don't want that. Very quick and easy. Grab another bunch of data. In we go. Click. Pick the charts. Have a look at the charts. What are we looking for? Stacked. Line. I think I want to go for a line. Select it, and the chart is there. That then kicks in the chart tools across the top, and these have been really quite enhanced in terms of the visuals, the formats that you might want to get. The galleries have been improved. The colours are a little bit more, I don't know, I guess softer, but they've gone down the pastel route a little bit more. They're just designed to be a little bit more visual. We've got some good colour ranges that you can play with in terms of how you want this to look. Again, live preview kicks in, gives us what we need to preview, select it once you're happy. But what Microsoft have also done is work out the fact that we may not be wanting to play with the tabs across the top. We don't necessarily want to go and work up on design tools and format tools. We want those tools right next to where the data is. So they've given us some options here, so I can pick out chart styles. So you get some little tools that sit along the side of the chart itself. Again, doesn't matter how the chart's created. Nice and simple. Go in and pick the format that we want. If you want to add elements in, that's easy to do. Again, live preview. Pick that stuff out. Quickly add a trend line there, nice and simple. And you've now also got the ability to add or to show visually categories. So this is almost like, and if you look at the symbol that's just next to that, this little icon here, it's pretty much allowing you to filter a chart visually. This is new stuff. This is designed to let you, chuck this chart up onto a projector screen, onto a wall, share it across, some kind of joint sort of conferencing facility, share your desktop. And as you look at the data, rather than having to rebuild a chart for every single, in this case, let's say month's worth of data, very simple. Use the tools that are there. It's all designed to be sort of at your fingertips, if you like. And a lot of this stuff as well, I would also point out, is also directly compatible with a touchscreen approach. So if you're doing this perhaps on a tablet device of some description, again, it can be shown very, very simply and accessed nice and easily as well. So we can produce some charts. They're all right. Quite like the sort of color schemes on those. And then what Microsoft are also doing is adding to the capabilities. Traditionally, when you bought a product off the shelf, you installed it out of the box, there might be one or two add-ins that came with it. You might have to go to a third party and buy some add-ins. Those add-ins now with 2013 are now really presented as your apps. So here on the Insert tab, what I've also got is a little group up here about apps. So we can go in and we can pull our apps in and we can start to pull apps. And these are not just Microsoft items. Some are free, some are for purchase. They are from third parties. And they are managed directly within the application themselves. So an example of an application, we might want to show our data using, say, maps. So you might want to show geographical data and locations around that. You might be looking at perhaps just slightly different ways of presenting it. I can put a chart together. I've got my charts up here. What it also now gives me is an option for recommended charts if I want to. Would do if I actually select the data, recommended charts, and it will give me a whole list of charts that I can choose if I want. So it's making some suggestions. It's reading the data together with all the other charts. So that's a new feature. It's a change. It's saying we think your data would look best like this. It's not necessarily the right choice for all environments, but the choices are now there. And the same also can be applied to pivot tables. So we've now got a section for recommended pivot tables on here as well. So it builds it for you. And we'll come to those in a little while. So back to the apps. I might want to look at my data slightly differently. Now, I'm just going to zoom this out just a little bit to give me a bit of space for the application. And I'm going to use an app which is it's a Microsoft one. And this one is called, well, it's really they call it a graph. I mean, I guess it's like that, but the idea is that it's a sort of chart, but not a chart. It's called a people graph. And there are various sort of versions of people graphs, but fundamentally what a people graph does, and if I just load this app up, what the people graph does is allow you to visualize some of your data using sort of icons more than anything else. So if I were to just come to the top here and just select a little bit of the data, so I'll go and select some data out of the list. And let's say we just want to grab, say, October's figures from here, and click that, create that. It'll then give me that. I can then just subtotal that a little bit. So I'll just call this one, let's say, October shipments. And that's done, and it gives me a default set of icons, if you like. If I don't quite want those icons, and this, I guess this will evolve. We can go up to the settings here. We can choose a different theme if you want, a different kind of color scheme on here. Again, mixing and matching with some of those sort of, if you like, the office themes. But it might be a different shape. You know, these are, let's say these are shipments out to customers, so we're going to ship them out in boxes. So why not go in and grab a box, grab the shape, give the shape a click away. And there is just a new way of visualizing your data. And that's called a people graph. Again, through the App Store. That was free. It's a Microsoft product created by them and available and loaded into the Office 2013 Excel environment. So there's lots of different ways of perhaps of visualizing that information. Now, what are the challenges that we find that we face, and when sort of customer information comes in and information is gathered and information perhaps is pulled out of other systems into an Excel environment? One of the challenges is that the data may not necessarily be in a format that is usable. And traditionally, Excel provides one or two tools to help you with that. There are a lot of text functions available. On the Data tab, we've got things like text to columns, where say, hey, take this and identify the delimiter, the character that should split these out and lay out my data. But what Microsoft have now done is add to that with a new tool, which is called Flash Fill. And Flash Fill allows you to point at a piece of data and provide Excel with a template as to how you would like that data to be displayed in a cell. So, for instance, if I've got the names down in column A there, if I said to Excel that what I really wanted was it to look like that, when it's got other characters in there, what I can then do is select the data, give it a template. I'm going to use the old autofill and just double click that just to fill that in. And it's filled it in. You think, oh, great, wow, I've got lots of Ms. Nancy DeValios now. But down in the Smart tag, we've got an autofill option, which is called Flash Fill. So they've extended the fill technology, if you like. And if I take Flash Fill, drop that in, you can see it's transformed all of that data. I didn't need to tell it which column it was in. I just needed to sort of basically relate it to the table in effect by working alongside it. So that I can do manually. I can do that with a click and sort of pull that data down. So there it's actually taking characters away. Let's say the phone numbers within column B here, I want to look at those perhaps slightly differently. So let's say I want those to have all a 0 in front of them. Maybe they had zeros, they were truncated, perhaps, when the data was imported, even though we've tried to format it as text. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of a template here, add some characters in, and replicate that. Just confirm that entry. And then either using the Data tab and Flash Fill, or complying with the design of the Home tab, which is to give you 85% of your sort of standard tools. Then over here in the editing group, we've got Fill and the Flash Fill option. So here I've not sort of said fill it in and then allow me to use, if you like, change that subsequently. I've just said fill it in. So I click Flash Fill, and it's gone and applied that to all of the other numbers to provide me with the same sort of format. It's clever technology, I think, in that it's sort of reading and making assumptions. It's not always going to be accurate, of course, and occasionally it may be, the changes you want to make might be too great. But that's a brand new feature within 2013. We think it's a really, really, to use a much maligned term, a cool feature, because it gives you perhaps a quick way of getting your data into a format that you can actually do something with it, or it might be usable elsewhere. If that, like the result there in column C, everything in one column is not what you want, text to columns, go down that route, that's fine. Separate it out because you want to use the surnames, the last names, first names separately. But just as a little example, we think that's a pretty clever item on there. So just to repeat, we can either take it, drag it down, get the smart tag and play with it from there, or home tab and over to the right hand side, fill it in, flash fill. Or if your habit is to sort of work with your data through your data tab, there's some logic there, of course, in that. We've got flash fill sitting up there. As you can see, it's placed alongside the sort of the text to column type idea. So it keeps everything in one go. So a couple of new features there in terms of the data. People graph, that's a new one, and the flash fill itself. Now on the Insert tab, what we had, of course, was we've got our apps, we've got our charts, we know we've got some recommended charts in here. We've also got these little Sparklines. Now, if I go back to the sales data, which we've played with, I just move that out of the way. And I'll just go and select my numbers again. Get the quick analysis. So if I come across to the Sparklines on the quick analysis tools, give Sparklines a click. Three types of Sparkline. The trend view, if you like, is the line chart. If you prefer a more traditional, go for the column chart. If you have a mixture of positive and negative numbers, go for the win-loss. But say, hover my mouse over the line chart, I'll see that. You'll see that preview to the right of the numbers, and that's literally giving you a chart in a cell. So it's a view of a row-by-row comparison visual rather than doing it on a full-blown chart, which may not be quite appropriate to the nature of the data you've got. Column charts the same. Again, with these are the same as with charts. Pick the option you want. I'll go click line, say in this case. I'll then get the Sparkline tools sitting across the top. But these can be enhanced. You can merge these across cells. You can play with these in different ways. We've got some sort of built-in styles that might match the way your data looks, however you want that to look. You can also say you may want to pick out, let's say, a low point and a high point, and just have those tweaked and shown here. And you can change the different colours for those. So I might want to say, right, I want let's say a high point in red, and I want my let's say I want my low point in let's say green, and that'll just apply that to these. These also, they sort of sit as a group. I select one, they become as a group. But if you perhaps want to sort of almost sort of dashboard these, pull these out, take them into different places, that's fine. You can select one, and with the Sparklines, you can then go in with the right click, ungroup that. I could then take that somewhere else if I wanted to and drop it and play with that, label it up. But it still relates, sort of retains a connection to the data. So if I come perhaps in here and we make an update to the data that's sitting there, let's make this a big change. You can see it updates to that Sparkline, but just that individual one. And this is where Sparklines perhaps give you an alternative against an ordinary chart. If I made a big change to the numbers there on a standard chart, Excel by default will rescale the whole chart, and therefore some of the smaller values, let's say December plants there, will become almost negligible, virtually very difficult to see. So the advantage using the Sparkline is that it allows you to visualize just one data set, but still compare it with others. So new tool in terms of Excel. If you come into this from sort of pre-2010, if you 2007 that it didn't exist, to 2003, directly from Microsoft, but they're now available. Say quick analysis, click, choose your Sparklines, grab what you want, apply them. Nice and easy. Now, that's all working with small data sets. Let's say you've got something a little bit bigger, and I'll pull my data through. We've got some data dumped in here. The information in here is has seen the light of day on many an occasion. It's taken from the old, um, if you like, Northwind database that shipped and continues to ship with Microsoft Access. We just cleaned it up a little bit and sort of play with it. So a bit of context. Each row represents an order. The company is our client. The country is their regional data. Salesperson is the employee locally that's dealt with that. Each order's got its own unique reference, a date, in, when they wanted it, when we shipped it, what they bought, how many, price, and then a total value of the order. There's about 2,150 odd lines worth of data here. So that might be held in any other system that Excel's capable of talking to. You know, it might be held might be in an Access database, but it might also be sitting in some kind of SQL-based database, in some kind of CRM products, SharePoint, wherever you aggregate your data, and then thrown into Excel to give you a little bit of an analysis opportunity to play with. So, the classic way of viewing this data, I might tabulate it, home tab, format as table, pick a style, get a table, filter it, play with it as a filter, and all that kind of stuff. Nice and easy. You know, I can do that if I want to. I've got my sort of data tab, and I've got things like the classic sorting and filtering. Increasingly, we are users of right clicks in terms of what we do. So, you know, if I want to perhaps sort of filter the data, very easy to right click and filter it by a cells value, its color. So again, if you're coming to Excel and viewing this from a sort of a pre-Office 2007 and the ribbon view, you've now got the opportunity within Excel to sort and filter by colors, by conditional formats. You've also got a right-click option for quick analysis as well. So you don't necessarily have to select stuff to start with. So there's some options there in terms of the right-click and just enhancing traditional views. If I apply a filter, one big move that has come with the last two versions of Excel when I go into the filter is the ability to do searches within the filter. So this was sort of, I guess, targeted into Excel 2010, but 2013 has just sort of beefed it up a little bit. So if I wanted to perhaps look at something that, you know, got an LAND in it, it automatically applies that. That's fine. That's my choice that I want. Enter it, get the filter, applies. Nice and simple. So I can do it quite quickly. If I just want to filter by a right click, let's say I want to find all my sign-in customers, so I go to Italy, right click, filter by selection, by the sales value, and I've just filtered by Italy. So you've got choices here in terms of how you come to this, to an end product. But filters evolved, and filters evolved in terms of how we use them and how we want to see the data. They're great on two-dimensional data. So this is two-dimensional data, classic heading across the top. Each row is a record. It's flat. It's quite difficult to model that data. But you might have pulled data in from different tables, from different places. If you have pulled data in from different areas, perhaps through Power Query or Power Pivot, you've now got an additional tool sitting on the Data tab called Relationships. So if you've got data that is basically a morphed output, if you like, a sort of a cumulative output from one or more data, piece of data in terms of a record set. So let's say you've got a record set which contains individual transactions. You've got another one which references maybe your customers, another one which maybe shows your products. You know, it's very easy in a database environment to add those three data tables into some kind of query, pull them together, and end up with a single view. And that's what you can do with Power Query, and then you can then go query those relationships back again with the relationship tool on here. But the classic view, of course, what has always been traditionally seen as the most powerful view of working with data, is working with pivot tables. Alluded to these a little bit earlier, so we can go in and we can build a pivot table. And that's quite simple. Click anywhere in your data, and that's one thing that Excel's pretty good at. You don't need to select your data to pivot it, to filter it. Just be in it. Excel works out its boundaries. It makes an assumption that the top row is a header, and then I can go in and I can build a classic pivot table if I want to. If I don't want to build a pivot table from scratch, I may not necessarily have the skills or the confidence to do that, to understand that. I might just not know that whether a pivot table is the right thing for my data. You can always go down a view where you look at recommended pivot tables. And clicking the recommended pivot table is a bit like the recommended charts. What Excel does is basically read the data. You can see from the sort of the marching, sort of what used to be like the marching black ants, the sort of the boundary of the data. It's picked that up, and then it's giving me some different views in the data. It's picking out what it thinks are key views. So it looks at the text information, and in the textual information that it sees, it then looks for duplication. So textual information in this particular environment is company name, country, salesperson, or product. All of those are textual-based fields. It then also looks for either cumulative or formula-based information. So, for instance, in this case, the extended price column that we have here is a combination of a simple multiplication between unit price and quantity, or for date-based information. Because dates, it likes to count to how many things have occurred, that kind of stuff. So it then summarizes these, and therefore, as you can see this one, sum of extended price by country. It's worked out the fact that the countries are not in, if you like, there's not lots of them as such, in them that it is they hold duplicated information. And likewise with the name, in this case, of the salesperson. There's only 9 salespeople. So that's sort of the lowest denominator in terms of numbers, I guess. But it's looking at working with the sum of the extended price against that, or so what has the salesperson done? What has the what have we done by country in this case, by regional? What's the total of those? So it's picking up, if you like, cumulative information, but it also then looks at the ability to use grouping. So in this case, the example, it's saying, hey, I'm going to group my data. I can group my data by country because each of the clients has got a piece of regional information, and then it will count how many we've done. And then we can expand that out. It's very easy, if I want to start playing with this stuff, is to just click into the data, say, how do I want to see this? Yes, that's not a bad view. Click OK. I get thrown into a new sheet. Pivot tables sitting down the right-hand side. Rename the sheet as you want. There's the original data. And I can then start to play with this stuff and analyze it and view what's sitting inside of that. So if you want a quick, simple way of building sort of quite a high-level view of your data, summarize, that's the idea of the pivot, make it three-dimensional, summarize that, allow you to model it in different ways, then those recommended pivots might just be a great starting place to actually sort of see, well, does our data fit a pivot or not? Not sure. Bang it in. Have a look. And if you're not sure about it, fine. I can go ahead and think, no, that's not quite what I want. I can either play with the fields to the right and drag them around, or I can simply say, no, that's not for us in this case. We need to go from scratch, delete it, get rid of the sheet, off it goes, and nothing's lost, if you like. So perhaps another way of just playing around with the data and looking at it from that point of view. Now, if I just move across into a little bit of a here's one I built earlier kind of view. Got a pivot table. We're summarizing this data. It's the same base data. It's been pulled through from that database. So we've got some basic filters sitting in the data themselves. So we can go and view. I want to look at this maybe by product. We're currently looking at it by who's bought what, as it were, against salesperson. Pivots, looks like a pivot. I get the pivot tools across the top. I get the ability to analyze it. I get the ability to play with its design. I can go and add some nice funky styles onto this and get it to look as I want to. Change how I want my subtotals and my grand report to look, if you like. Nothing really new there. But one of the things that we've traditionally done with pivot tables is treat a pivot table as a, if you like, a container, a cube, to a three-dimensional tool, one that I can then go and have a look at and turn it around, model it, change what sits on what side and what summary I get in the middle of it. And pivots remain one of the most powerful data tools that are available sort of out of the box, if you like, within the Excel environment. Now, if I want to perhaps look at this a little bit further, so let's say that I pick a number here. Let's say we've got what Berklands have purchased via Anne Dodsworth. I can go in a traditional view. I might want to see what records make up that one number. That number, by the way, is simply a cumulative. It's a sum. It's a summary of every time that client has been sold a product by that salesperson, gather it together and give me a number. And we've always been able to drill the data. I can go through, double-click the data. Excel looks at does basically an advanced, if you like, filter, and has pulled from my base sheet, the raw data sheet that we've got, which we base this pivot on. It's pulled out all of the data in a tabular format that matches that number or makes that number, its constituent parts, if you like. And that's fine, but it gives me everything. I might want to look at that perhaps in a slightly different way. So what Microsoft have done is taken the idea of drilling that information and taken it a couple of stages further. So if I were to select a number that I particularly was interested in, so let's say I'll just come back and we'll reselect that number, we get a little smart tag. The Quick Explore Smart Tag. Now this is a brand new feature for 2013 in terms of how it appears and what it does. We've always been able to write functions using things like get pivot data to drill through data. But here I can go in, give the smart tag a click, and it asks me what do you want to explore. So fundamentally what it's picking up is the row label off to the left-hand side. So, here's my client. How do I want to see the data that sits in here? Do I want to perhaps go and look at what products are there? So I can pick a number and I can drill down to that. So I might want to say, well, okay, what products have been purchased by that client? When I did the drill just a few seconds ago, I double-clicked the cell and it pulled out only the data from the raw data, the base data, only the table data that made up that single number in the selected cell. I may want to look a little bit further than that. Now, I might want to look at this from the point of view, well, okay, I don't just want Anne Dodsworth's views, if you like. I actually want to see different ways, different pieces of information, different ways of examining that. So we can go in. So I'll go in and I'll say, okay, what have we done by product name? So I'll select it on the left, drill to product name, and I will stay when I click this inside the pivot table itself. So it's now showing me all of the products that have been purchased by this company and who sold them. I can then go down and pick that information out. So I'm still in the same pivot table, select the table again, select that again, and I can then drill down further. So I can say, okay, well, when did they place those orders? Drill to the order dates. And I can still keep continuing down. Okay, now when they placed that order, what product did they order? So in effect, what you're doing is you're layering up filters, drilling through the data and layering these filters in such a way that they are applied in the order you wish to apply them and get down to the smallest possible piece of information that you can. So I can take a cumulative, I want to grab something that's off the left-hand side, let's say one of my my row labels, and then just really start to drill into that data. That might be a client, it might be a product, it might be a set of activities that are generating a cumulative number. Let's say volume of calls received, or that kind of stuff, or maybe employee-based information. Anything that can be cumulatively summarized in a pivot could then be drilled down step by step, and then keep going down and having a look at that, and maybe that can come back up again if I want to. So all these are filters. And once it applies the filter, I could then go in and say, okay, well, let's go and start to look at some other comparison. Maybe I want to pick a different order date. Or maybe I want to say, actually, I'm looking at that view, that's great, let's go and look at a different client. So I can select a different client, maybe go for the orders on that one, let's pull out the orders for that. So I can start to sort of go in and come back out. Okay, when did that client buy that product? So if you like, you're almost creating like a trail through your data. At any given time, you can remove all filters. It works like ordinary filters. Just pull the filters back up, pull that data back up, nice and easy. Drill your way all the way back up in here. Do it from the left, do it from here. So treat it like an ordinary view, if you like, so you can create the layers. All of these functions are undoable. So as you drill down through the data, you can then sort of undo or remove the filter to bring you back up to where you were with the traditional view of the pivot. So I guess it's giving you the ability to look inside of information, look inside that two-dimensional information. Treat it like a cube, look at it like a cube, turn it around, pick a number, select the number. It could be anything, and I could do the same. It doesn't matter, I happen to pick that one number. It could be any of those numbers, for instance, on that row that would still allow me to drop the data in here. If I don't want to see this particular entry on the left-hand side, swap them around, drag the rows around, field to field. Maybe I put the country down there, maybe I put the employee down there, maybe I put the product down there, and I want to see who's bought the product. There's lots of different ways of playing with the data when you actually go in and view your pivot data. And Microsoft have also introduced a couple of other features that you can play with. In here, they also introduced the ability to analyze the data with filters, but with filters that perhaps are, I guess I don't want quite the right phrase for this, filtering data for what's not, or by what's not there. I know that doesn't sound necessarily that it makes sense. If I want to filter a table of information, in order to be able to filter it, to drill into that data in some way, to sort of sharpen my view of it, I've got to have that column available, that field available somewhere in that table to be able to filter it. Because Microsoft started to understand that we were looking at bigger data sets, we were looking at maybe wanting to summarize some information but filter it by another process, they introduced in 2010 the concept of the slicer. So if you've not seen Excel 2010, the slicer was a pivot view, and you can use it in actual fact on any connected data set. So as long as the data set is loaded into your model, it sits within your data. And by a model, if I just click onto data and click connections, these are all the models that are loaded in. So we've got one through Power Query, we've got a couple from databases, we've got a local workbook model. So when you pull data down through Power Query, connect to a data store of some description through Power Pivot, or just importing the data, you basically create a connection. The connection then loads that as a data model into your workbook. That can be stored locally, it can be stored remotely, but it's referenced within the connection. As long as something has a connection or a data model behind it, you can use a slicer on it. And a slicer sits within the Analyze tab, and they're up here in the Filter group. So I insert a slicer, and I pick exactly what I want to use in here. So, for instance, I don't have either the product or the country here. So I'm going to go and pick out the country, and I'm going to go and pick out the product name. So these are two fields that are not present on my current pivot table. I'll click that, and here are my two slices. And I can make the slices sort of colours, and like so we've got all our office themes in here. That's a bit lurid. Let's go for a bit of green on that one, and then come over here, and let's just make that one a bit different. And it's very simple. And I realise these are taking up a lot of screen space at the moment, just our view of it. But you know, I want to go and see what have we done within a particular country. So let's say I want to scroll down. I want to see what we've done within the UK. I click the UK. Now the country field is not present, but I'm now going to filter my pivot table and any subsequent pivot chart that I might have. Click UK. That's given me just the UK data. So it's pulled out the UK in here. If I were to then to go and say, okay, let's see UK and a particular product. So I want to go and say, well, what have we done with product down here? Let's say EPO coffee. Give that a click. There I can see that. So I'm filtering my view of my data live using the slicer to allow me to give a view of the data by fields which are not present. Like any other filter, always look for some kind of X to get rid of it as such. So I can clear the filter, pull those back out. So now I'm just looking at what we've done with that product. That's all countries. If I want to perhaps look at more than one country, you can click and drag, applies the filter. If your countries, like most things, are not necessarily sort of stacked together in this particular case, let's say I want to see Austria and Canada and Finland, just picking those because they're on the screen, use the Alt Control key, pick the non-contiguous items so I can get a view. Very, very simple. I can then, of course, click into a piece of data. I can drill down through that data and as before. So the slicers are great for two reasons, I think. One, they allow you to get a view of your data without having to add extra information into that table, for want of a better expression. It's just so that you can filter it. So they are available on any tabular data which is loaded into the workbook model. So whether that be through a remote connection, locally, pivot, whatever it is. So they are one particular. So that's one sort of reason for using them, if you like, is the fact that it gives you an extra flexibility. But another thing, it also allows us in a, and this is a kind of sort of offhand sort of approach to data. I might want to try and identify sort of, even just sort of visually, what's not there. So to give you an example, I'll go back to our UK. We'll pick the UK, and we can see what we've sold into the UK, or who we've sold into the UK. And these are our UK clients. And it lists here, alphabetical list of the products. Now that alphabetical list, if I scroll down to the bottom of this list, note the colour changes. Where the colour changes, anything that is not sort of emboldened, doesn't have a sort of a bold colour behind it. So in this case, all of these products, I come down to the Zs and becomes Carnarvon Tigers. I'm looking at that list at the bottom, and that's a list in this case of all the products we haven't sold to that country or to any of those clients. So it's showing me in effect visually what's not there. So if you're looking to target activity, looking to target products into areas for sales, that kind of stuff, or identify actions that have not sort of been taken, a slicer might just give you a visual clue as to where you need to go and look, where your actions need to be, by showing you, as I say, what's not there. So, new feature for later versions of Office. 2010 they were originally introduced with. But, great little feature on those. Add the slicer in. So pivot table, analyze, insert slicer, drop them in, and then slice away, as it were, in terms of your data. Get rid of a slicer. To remove it, filter otherwise, nice and easy. Right-click it and just choose a remove option. It'll always label it, or click once onto it and just press the old delete key and it will disappear. And I'm back to my base data. So perhaps a different way of visualizing the information, or getting to a point where you can start to then drill down further into that data itself. Let me just move that sheet. They're sort of sitting alongside slicers. Microsoft identified that there are also sort of different ways of looking at your data, or different ways of filtering your data. And that's not necessarily by an entry on a particular view, such as a column label or a row heading kind of thing, but where you are perhaps looking at maybe time-based information. That base pivot table sitting there doesn't give me any information around time. I can certainly add time in if I want to. And if I go into my the sort of the pivot itself, not a problem with that. We can drop the fields in. So I'm just going to put the field list back up. Now, if I want to put the date in here, let's say I remove the product name, get rid of that, and replace that perhaps with an order date. I can look at time-based information. It tends to be quite messy very often, particularly if you've got sort of individual points in time, as we have here. I can then summarize that in some way. I can right-click on it, and I can take the data and group it. We can start to merge it together if that's what you want to do with it. But very often, because a data course is looking at pulling information across multiple sort of multiple intersections in time, looking at that perhaps on a summary basis, maybe monthly or quarterly or annually, may not necessarily be that easy to sort of play with in terms of the data. Lots of filters. So what we've got sitting within our sort of pivot view, inside the filters, was a new feature, timeline. And what a timeline does is pretty similar to a slicer. A slicer tends to work on text-based information, tends to, it's not a guarantee, sort of given, tends to. And whereas a timeline is looking at that date-based information. Again, assume that we've got a base pivot table here. There is no date-based information. I'm seeing very high-level summary. I can come into here if I want to, and I can pick a number, and I can go quick explore, and I can start with that quick explore to sort of drill down into that data and say, how do I want to drill it? That's not a problem, and pull that data out if I want. I might want to do it by order date and drill down to that level. That's all doable, all nice and easy. But if I want to look at the whole thing by date, rather than just an individual entry, I need to use something a little bit sort of higher up in terms of its view. So I go for a timeline. I insert a timeline, and very much like the slicer, what it's asking you is to pick out a date-based information. So let's say I go for my order date here, which sits against each of the records inside. Click OK. And we've got a little bit of a tool that sort of looks, as I say, a little bit like a slicer in terms of it's a visual thing to play with and click on. Let me just extend that out a little bit. So you can see it's picking out the sort of the month periods, etc. And if I want to go and actually physically look at, let's say, what do we do in June? Give it a click. And I've now just got the June-based data. Yeah, month to month. Look at it month by month. Nice and simple. Click. If I'm perhaps saying, okay, we're now in April, I want to look at the first quarter's worth of the data. I can come in, I can select, and then I can elongate and extend that selection period. Simple click and drag from the edge. Let go of that, and I've now got, in effect, a quarter's worth of data. And it's picked up how many months I've selected. If you look at the fact it's labeling it up here, let's say this was last year's sales numbers, Q1 2013. To remove it, to take you back, same as with the slicer, top right, give it a click, takes you back to the detail. Now it defaults to months. It may not be that months are the thing. I might actually want to see this in quarters. So I can choose from the selector, the date unit selector on the right-hand side. I'll go for quarters, gives me a quarterly view, so I can then physically pick a quarter. Nice and easy. Again, same principle. I can extend that out and look at the data and then drill that. So I'm using date-based information to say, give me an overview, give me a top-down view, then I'll go in and drill that data itself. If you want to take that data to be a little bit further down, other than your months, I can literally go down to day by day. So what did we do, let's say, in these 6-7 days in the March, give it a click, and there's our numbers. Nice and easy. And that's, in some ways, is probably a little easier than using the filter. If I put a filter field up on there, let's say I put the order date into the pivot table, I've got to go and use some kind of custom filter, say between this and between this point and this point in time, where I've got to select multiple boxes. Here, nice and easy, I can just simply click and drag and take what I want out of that. So, great little feature, I think. It's new. Take the filter off that. Like with all of these things, when you add the feature in, the ribbon will morph itself into an alternative view. And here, big on the style, so we can have a consistent look and feel across how we actually physically look at something. It might want to be something a little bit different in terms of the numbers, in terms of the colours. Play with those, and you can also create your own. So you can actually go into a timeline style, and like with everything on here, if it gives you a gallery to choose from, there will be a customizable option. So I can go in and I can pick a new style, and then I can say how I want individual portions to look like. So you might want to say have a particular look and feel. So in here they'll then appear as say as custom. So in this case I've got a custom green, and if I've chosen it Yeah, it's green is chosen, blue is not. Again, very simple to set up. Just go and click and drag the entries that you want, and it'll apply that for you. So it reads the data type. Again, to remove a slicer, sorry, a timeline, right-click, remove it, or click on it and just press delete. And if you remove a slicer or a timeline and the data is filtered, then the filters are removed and it's taken back, if you like, to a complete view of the original data. So that's found through Analyze when you're sitting in the pivot table tools and insert timeline. Because that tool and the slicer tool are also available on, as I say, any other modeled data, any other data that's been imported into Excel and sits as a connection or a standalone model, perhaps off a web view, that kind of thing, then of course you'll then have the ability with the data to sort of play with that. So back to the Insert tab, and over here on the right-hand side, we've got slices and timelines to show us exactly what we want to see within our data. Same process, reads the tabular data, works the same. So if your data is not in a pivot, it's just a workbook model, a connected workbook model, you can still use these two tools. And that slicer being available for other views, if you like, is new to 2013. They were only previously available to pivot tables. They're now available across all kinds of data. So different ways of visualizing your information, different ways of looking at the data. We can chart it, we can pivot it, we can select our information, and then from the selection go in and drill that data further so we can look inside of that information. We can get the data to look as we want, give it a model, play with it that way. And we can Sparkline it, and we can select it, and we can do some quick data analysis based around the information that we throw at it. So a lot of these tools, whilst some of them are sort of new in terms of where they are, the technologies and the capabilities are really enhancements. There are some new stuff or new bits and pieces. The apps are new, and the ability to use the slices and timelines elsewhere are new. Recommended charts are new, and the recommended pivots are new. And then this right-click quick analysis tool that you get, which is sort of present, or the select and get the icon and go and play with it, is also new. Now, one completely new view, again, this is we've got a couple of sort of, if you like, at the moment, applications and sort of add-ins for Excel which are in an evolving state from Microsoft. Power Query, as I say, allows you to connect to other data sources. So I might go and do an online search, and so I'm not sort of pointing at any sort of particular, I guess, store of data. This is just saying to Excel, go out there into the sort of the world of the web, as it were, and see what you can find. So if I were to go in and say, okay, let's say I want my vehicle registrations. Not going to find anything if I type it like that, mind. Vehicle registrations for electric vehicles, electric cars. Let it do this. And then I can go in and I can start to pull data down. And this stuff, I guess, will evolve as well, because the nature of the data out in the web is maturing. So we can start to sort of see. You can see these are wiki views of data. All it needs basically is to be able to go and look out and see what's out there in terms of the sort of the data. Not going to help if I can't type electric either. Let's just try that again. Yeah, that's what I wanted. So there you are. There's a bunch of data, and I give that a click on the right-hand side. I'm not overwriting any data here. It just doesn't matter what sheet I'm in. But what Excel's now doing is creating a connection to that data. It's asking me how I want to see it. It's previewing it at this point. So it's not, in actual fact, sort of anywhere other than I'm showing it, if you like. And if you notice, the ribbon has now changed to be a query where we can talk about, so I might actually want to go and pull this data, and then I've done a new search, I'm going to go and merge it, I'm going to append it, I'm going to go and throw it into an existing data store, if you want to. But in order for me to work with it, let's say offline, to be able to do some stuff with it, I mentioned this a few times now, talking about the data model, this load to data model. So the idea is that you then sort of, if I give that a click, what that'll do is then pull the data down and store it into Excel. And it's the same, I've just used a web search here, but I could use this on any other data store that I can go and connect to. So it's now loaded down in here. I've now got this data. This data is sort of sitting within Excel. And I can now start to do some stuff with it. It comes in, of course, as a field, sort of set of fields within a table, but I can then go and start to say, actually, how do I want to see this? I want to start to play with this stuff and view it in different ways. And then really start to sort of analyze that in a meaningful way. So it doesn't matter where that data store is. It's just a column down. It doesn't matter where the data store is. It gives me the capacity through the Power Query add-in to go and look, to go and search. Now, it doesn't matter, as I've done online, but it can be from wherever we saw sort of the sort of start off of this session. It doesn't matter where that is, wherever you want to point to. So it might be in-house, it might be external, you know, organizations we know we'll pull data in, we'll aggregate data that we perhaps have on a subscription model, or we're pulling it in from other places. We may just be harvesting data from somewhere, pull that data in, load it down. Once it's in here as a model, then you can start to sort of sit and play with that data offline, do what you want to do with it. So it's you know, it's an evolving tool at the moment. As you can see, we've still got the sort of the old SAS, as I mentioned earlier, send a smile, send a frown, send them a bit of feedback on this one. It's a good view, we think, to have of your data, or a good way of getting your data into a local Excel sort of view. If that is not the sort of appropriate, if you like, that way of just sort of go connect to the data and query it in this sort of way, then you have, of course, got Power Pivot built in, where you can go in and create a set of data and add data in and go and collect from that. So you go to your data model, go to Power Pivot, connect to an external source. And that's really great if you want to leave the data outside of Excel. Power Query is really, I guess, aimed at this moment in time. It seems at least we're pointing that way to say, go get the data, find it, connect to it, pull it into Excel, leave it there. Whereas Power Pivot is really about connect to your data, wherever that data is, multiple tables, merge it together, and give me a cumulative view, a pivoted view. If a pivoted view is not appropriate, go for the Power Query. So it's how do you want to see it? Back to that sort of set of questions. What is your view that you need to see of the individual data itself? And then the final sort of, if you like, tool, what we've got sitting on the Insert tab is Microsoft Power View. And Power View builds upon all of the sort of the capacities that we've sort of talked about. It's got charting, it's got tabular data, we can filter data, we can view it by region, we can view maps. And Power View is about creating a sort of like a single sheet single sheet view to represent a summarized report. Its core technology is pivots, and the capacity for Excel to model data using that kind of technology. Now, we have our raw data that we've seen in various views here. I've got a Power View sheet. Just get rid of the query settings. So what this is trying to show me is a view of my data. Now, at the moment, all I've got is some very high-level summarized information. So the Power View fields on the right-hand side, they are in effect your pivoting tools, your views that you want to create. We can filter the information as we wish based upon the data. We can summarize the information here. What we can then sort of think about with the actual views is how we want to visualize it. So in effect, what you've got here sitting on the left-hand side is just a set of summarized sort of which is like pivoted style information. But if I want to see that in a slightly different way, I can chuck it into a chart. I can then decide how I want to see that data, how I want to filter that data if necessary. So I could then go in and say, and do some stuff on here. So we can add a filtering. It might be that here, sorry, very small. That it's saying sort by country. So we've got the sorting, the country fields in here, and these are values. You can see it's giving me some scale. It's in thousands. So I've got some charts. Stacked bar showing me 100%, so that's fine. But if I go to a clustered column, I might want to see it a different way around. And it does some formatting stuff for me. It allows me to visualize it. I can then decide how I want to see that. I might want to see this as some kind of pie. I can then zero in. I can then go and filter the data. This is a great thing about the pie charts, So I've got in here, I've got my pie information. I can play with the layout of this, and I might want to add in sort of, labels to this kind of stuff. I might want to change the title, but it allows me again to visualize that data simply by selecting one of the entries in here. It's the same data as we were looking at before, but there's different ways of playing with it. Do I want to see it as a chart? Do I want to see it? Oops, that was not the one I intended. Beg your pardon. Give me that. And so depending on what the data is, you can throw it out and just visualize it. And it's designed to be almost like a chart on a sheet. So that's referencing, I guess, a screen view, an A4 view. It's that kind of view of your data. What I'm going to see if it will do, if you've got the app installed, and on the insert, what I've got, some apps. I've got the Bing Maps, that's this one in here. What I have the capacity also to do is to look at this information using some kind of geographical view sitting behind by dropping it into a map. And that's great, as long as you give it enough information. So if you were let's say you're only looking for information for perhaps a small region, maybe to Europe, maybe just say to the UK, as long as you give information such as postcode-based information or that kind of stuff, then Bing Maps, which is what the app is, to driving that in the background, is quite happy to pick that up, pick up the data, regionalize it, and then in this case, the view, the bigger the circle, if you like, the bigger the number, the bigger the value, and I can then go and see what kind of stuff's sitting in here. And we can zoom this in, and we can drag it around and have a look and sort of okay, well let's go and see what we're doing over here in Europe. All this requires is an internet connection. The app is local, but it's of course it's feeding off live geographical information from Bing Maps in here. So it's starting to sort of really drill into the data, give me some quite high level detail here in terms of how I want to look at this, and I can play around with the map and drag this around, and then we can go and see, well, okay, what are we doing? Where are the numbers and what's playing out? So, new view, new way of looking at your data, power view, pull it off the, pull it down as an add-in for Excel, throw it some data which is either numerical and or regional based, and then once you've got that in there, you can decide how you actually want to see that. As I say, whether you want to see this as charts, whether you want to see it as a map, entirely up to you. Lots of different ways of looking at that information. So back to those questions. Getting the data in. Think about what your connection is trying to, or you're trying to generate in terms of the data import. Are you pulling data in that's just going to be a one-off, in which case a traditional insert or sort of a file tab approach. If you want to connect to it and connect to it in a certain way, but perhaps leave the data elsewhere, use power pivots. or one of the Power Query views will also provide that. But then the Power Query will also give you the option to then merge your data into existing imported data, into existing views and tables. You can create relationships between different tables of data, so the stuff can be in different places. Once those data models are loaded into Excel, you can then use the relationship tool either within Power Query or Power Pivot to then manage that, the links, so that you end up with a view. And what kind of tools have you got? So just sort of a bit of a recap there. Traditional tools, we've got, they've been in there for a while, subtotling, pivoting, conditional formatting, visualizing the information, but then looking at perhaps those in a different way. Overall, a lot of that's labeled up as quick data analysis, but then you've also got other stuff, timelines, slices that we've used, the Power View, example of that app, the People Graph, put the little boxes in, see how many packages you've sent out, Flash Fill, convert your data. So there's lots of new tools sitting within Excel, and new takes on old tools, I guess, is probably the main thing to sort of think about in terms of looking at Excel as an application as a whole. Lots of tools out the box, and it's technology that is there, which is easy to get to, it's easy to use. And a bit like the recommended pivots, you don't necessarily need to understand the mechanics of how a pivot table works, but perhaps you do need to know what it can do. And that's the key to how Microsoft are developing Excel. They have recognized that as Excel has evolved, and if you can remember earlier versions, so even go back to say 2003, that version there, not a lot of columns, not a lot of rows. Excel morphed into 2007 and gave us all of these new big sort of capacities. Microsoft have recognized that Excel is becoming the sort of de facto reporting, presenting, analyzing tool for an awful lot of organizations, but the data is not always stored there. Hence the reference to different ways of getting the data in. So that's what we've tried to look at in this session. I'm going to draw this to a close now. If you've got any questions or queries post this event, please feel free to use the email address that's on the screen, drop the inquiries in, regardless of the type of inquiry, just drop into that, either a combination of the sort of the title for this, or the actual, or my name in there, and it'll get dealt with. We will attempt to come back to you as soon as possible in terms of an answer. So at this point, I'm going to sign off. Thank you very much, and hopefully it's been of use. Getting a couple of nice comments popping through. Thanks very much. To one from Canada. Hi to Canada. So yeah, hopefully it should provide a little bit of a view of where Excel's going, what it's now capable of, and we very much hope that you can sort of use the technology to its full. And with that, I will hand over if Sam's around. And thanks very much.
Just one final note from me is that when you leave the session today, the QA evaluation page will launch in your browser window. Really appreciate you just taking a couple of minutes just to give us your feedback. Thank you very much.